Good morning, everybody. It is August 20th, 2025, 7:08 in the morning. I am a morning riser. Always have been. That's a whole nother story. But let's see. When we last left our heroine, that's me, I was just leaving P&M truck stop where everybody had looked at me really strange. On my way to my new life and new adventure, little could I know what I was about to step into. So they said it was the first road on the right. So I'm driving down the road, and on the right, I see this paved road, maybe half a mile up the road. But before I see that, I see this huge billboard. I mean, a billboard. Now, you might say to yourself, a billboard, so what? Well, listen, back then, we're talking 1979 here, you had three choices. You could, and I keep saying 1979. Actually, it was the very end of 1978. It was December 1978. So let me correct that. Back then, you could advertise things three ways. You could advertise them with radio, TV, or a billboard. And a billboard was a big deal. I mean, they were costly, they were huge, out on the side of the highway. Get a lot of information from a billboard. And this billboard was black with a white border and white letters, and in cursive it said, Sitting Rock Arabian Horse Farms, largest horse farm on the East Coast. Now, I was impressed, because who did I know? Nobody that had a whole billboard. So there I go, down the road, towards Sitting Rock Arabian Horse Farm. And all of a sudden, I come up on this chain link fence. It's about 6 foot tall. And I look down and I see horses out everywhere in this chain link fence. And I keep following it and following it and following it and following it. And it's very long. And all the way on this chain link fence, I just see horses and horses and horses. And a green valley with white barns. And finally, I get to the end of the chain link fence and I turn left, and now I'm going down kind of more of a private road, but it's still a county road. And on my left is chain link, chain link, chain link, chain link. It's just going on forever and ever, and horses and horses and horses and horses. And by the time I actually get to the main house where the entrance was, I knew that this was where I wanted to be, with all those horses and all those people that worked with those horses. And so at that point, I was determined I wasn't going to let this be a failure like the first one, the first job. If you don't know about the first job, you gotta go look back at part one, which I'm actually going to put in the comment of this one, so you'll have both. But you can go to my YouTube channel, Corkey, Corkey Miller, and see it. So then I see this main house. It's white with black shutters, and there's this big, huge gate, iron gate, and it's open, and the sign says, drive slow. And I turn in this paved driveway, and I'm driving by the main house on my left and more horses on my right. And I see another sign that says, drive slower. And then another one says, drive slower. And then I'm entering a parking lot. And the parking lot was not full. It was probably half full. And I parked my Gremlin. Now, it was the 22nd of December. But it was mild. It was probably 60s. North Carolina. Wasn't cold, really. But I left a blanket curled up for my little dog, and I went down through the parking lot. I saw a sign, office, to the right. And from there I could see many buildings. There was the building I was getting ready to walk into. and I could hear voices, and it was a large white building. And when I got in there, I found out that there was an arena on the right, and down below was the cell barn, which is really nice. Off to the far right, and you could see it from inside because the arena was just a covered arena. There was no wall. There was a mobile home, like a double-wide mobile home I could see, and I figured that's where the girls or the people lived. I didn't know. And before I entered the barn, to the left, there was a huge main barn, I'm assuming, but it was big. I couldn't tell how big from there. So I walked in the door, and I saw people lunging horses and talking, and a white rail fence between me and them, and there were bleachers. So, like, if people came to watch, I guess. And then there was a little ramp that went down to the cell barn, and the sign for the office said upstairs. So I go upstairs, and I met the receptionist, and I don't remember her name, but Nick Nickerson. If you remember her name, put it in the down below in the comments. Remind me. And she was sitting in there, and she said, "Oh, hello. How are you?" And I said, "I'm Kimber Miller." And I said, "I would like to. I'm here to apply for the job, and I have an appointment at 9." I think at that point it was like 8:30. And so she said, "Okay, sit down. They've got a little trouble down in the barn. They've had a mare that aborted, and it's going to be a little bit." I said, "Okay, no problem. I'm going to be honest with you. Aborted, I didn't even know what that word meant. I mean, I think I'd heard it before, but I didn't know. I didn't connect it to abortion, and I had just a brain freeze and couldn't think of what that was. And I was really trying hard to remember what that was, but I just nodded my head and I sat down. And at first I just sat there politely for about 15 minutes, and then I realized it was going to be a little while because she kept telling me it's going to be a little while. And so there were a bunch of magazines, Arabian Horse World and Saddle World, and all these worlds on the coffee table in front of me. So I thought, well, good. At least maybe I can educate myself a little bit. Because at that point, you don't know what you don't know. But I thought I was like a real horse person because I had a pony, and I had ridden all over Ashe County on the Vinoy's horse Tonka. Shout out to Pam, Barbara, and Ward Vinoy for that. And so anyway, I thought I knew a lot, but when I started looking in these magazines, I was like, oh man, this is just a whole nother world. And I started reading every little article I could read, and pretty soon time passed. It was like 11 o'clock, and she said, "Do you want to reschedule for another day?" And I thought, no, I'm here. I'm not going home without this job, I'm thinking to myself. And I said, "No, I'm fine. I'll wait." Now, we didn't have cell phones back then. And I was thinking, my mom might be getting worried, but I didn't want to ask her if I could use the phone just yet. So lunch came, and my stomach was growling, and the secretary took out a sandwich and started eating it and offered me half, and I declined. I said I was fine, and I think I had $1 in my pocket, and I was thinking, well, maybe I can stop at that PM truck stop on the way back and get something to eat. And back then you could probably get fries and a drink for $1. Anyway, I'm sitting there, and hours are ticking by, and I'm reading more and more and reading up about these books. And then I find this pamphlet, and it's on Sitting Rock Arabian Horse Farms. And they're talking about all the things that they do, the shows that they go to, the breeding that they do with the horses. And on the back of it, there's a picture of Sotep, which at that time was a big deal because Sotep was a Raffles son. And Raffles was a really big deal in the Arabian horse world. And there were a bunch of girls around the horse and a big cake, and they were celebrating his birthday. And I thought, wow, that's so cool. These people celebrated a horse's birthday here at Cedar Rock Arabian Horse Farms. And I was like, wow, this is pretty neat. So then, it was like 2:00, and somebody had called up to the office and asked for some paperwork. And she said, we're going to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Why don't you take this paperwork down to Andre and give it to him? And I said, okay, I could do that. And she described how to go down there. So I took the paper, went down the steps, went down through the ramp, into the sale barn, saw a few girls, waved, they didn't wave back, went out through the sale barn, across the open area there, and there were 3 big garage doors. And she told me it'd be the one on the far right. And I went to the one on the far right, and I slid it open, I slid in, I slid it closed, and there was a white truck right there with kind of a camper type thing on the back with a bunch of drawers and things. It ended up being the veterinarian's truck. And I went around that truck and I walked up to the office. And the office had a glass door. You could see everything that was in the office. And I saw 2 guys in there, a blonde guy, big guy, and a little short guy about my size, who had kind of a green shirt on. I thought he might be the vet. And I tentatively knocked on the glass, and they looked at me, and they smiled. And Dr. Webster, who I would learn later, Dr. John Webster, good shout out to John. And he let me in, and a big smile on his face, and Andre took the papers from me, and he said, oh, what a beautiful girl. You're so welcome here. Thank you for bringing this. And I'm pretty sure I turned beet red because I don't think too many men had ever called me a beautiful girl before. So I was kind of taken aback by that. And him and John talked for just a minute, and then John got in the car, and John left. And so it was just me and Andre there. And Andre said, so you want to be a horse person? You want to work here at Arabian Horse Farm? And I said, yes, I would really like to work here. And he said, well, you're kind of small. And I said, don't let that change your mind. And he said, well, do you have any horse experience? And I said, well, I have a little bit of horse experience. I ride and that, And so he said, that's great. That's fantastic. And then he said, we work very hard here. We get up very early in the morning. We work very long days. And a lot of people, they come and they quit. I said, I won't quit. And he said, how do I know that? And I said, I tell you what. I said, why don't you let me work for 1 week for free? You don't have to pay me. And if I'm not as good as you would like for me to be, then I will leave, no questions asked, and that's the end of it. If I'm as good as you think I can be, then you can pay me for that week and you can hire me. That would be great. And he says, okay, this sounds like a good deal. And I said, just one thing. He said, I can start you tomorrow. I said, that's great. But can I have Christmas Day off? And he said, yes, we can arrange that. You can have Christmas Day off. So that meant I was going to work 2 days, the 23rd and 24th, be back on the 26th. And he says, okay, where are you going to stay? I said, I'll drive back and forth. And he said, no, I like you. You bring your stuff. You come after Christmas with your stuff. I find a place for you. If you do good first 2 days. I said, okay, great. Shook his hand, thanked him, got back in the gremlin, and headed home. It was probably about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I knew my mom was going to be freaking out. And that's the end of part 2. Want to know more? It gets good. So, please subscribe, share, like, help an old lady out, and hear my story. Trust me, you're going to love it. Thanks for listening. Everybody have a great day. Love you all. Thank you. Bye-bye.